I said in my previous video on Resident Evil 2 Remake that I had played it quite a lot, but in time since doing that video, I played it even more. Right now, I'm close to completing all the campaigns with an S+ rating. I've earned all the unlockable weapons, and it's so fucking awesome to just tear apart enemies, and especially the boss fights with the infinite rocket launcher or the infinite minigun. It's pretty clear to me that the 2019 Resident Evil 2 is one of my favorite games. Moments can still get a jump out of me, even if I played the game a lot. It was just incredible. In 2019, it was announced that in 2020 we would receive an RE Engine remake of 1999's Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, only dropping the subtitle and just calling it Resident Evil 3 2020. It got announced before I had played RE4 or RE2 makes, so my only thought was that it was strange for a AAA release to come out so soon after the previous one. I mean, we really don't live in the world of sequels just being 1 year removed anymore. My friend told me that the original Resident Evil 3 was not supposed to be the full third entry, rather just being a spin-off about a survivor trying to escape Raccoon City from the nightmare established in Resident Evil 2. This idea was taken, the protagonist turned into Jill Valentine returning from Resident Evil 1, and it was made to be Resi 3. With the original RE3 being closely tied to the original RE2, I guess it makes some sense for the remakes to be the same way. I have played know almost nothing about Resident Evil 3 in comparison to the first two, which I'm fine with. I'll get into all of it when I do a video on that game. As for the remake, in 2020 I really got into the RE2 make as established before. When I got my fill, I decided to pick up RE3 make and gave it a shot. Before coming back to it for this video, I only played the game once and just never felt the need to come back to it. RE4 I've played through to the end twice, working on the third, and RE2, I couldn't even tell you. Since the last video, I went back and finished the Resi 1 remake and thought it was great too. So of the 4 games that I have beaten, RE3 stands out because it's the one that I consider kinda forgettable. This is what I want to explore in this video. I never played Resident Evil 3, so that expectation isn't there for me, same with RE2, but I just wasn't taken with this game like I was the previous one. So let's talk about why. 2020's RE3 is not without things that I thought were really good. Starting with something I noticed immediately. Like RE2, finding a new item prompts the game to tell you what it is, and then it goes into the inventory. One small but impactful change was that collecting that same item somewhere else in the game world just adds that item to your inventory in whatever space allows for it. In RE2, you'd have to decide where it was going to go in the inventory. This small change just makes the game feel faster paced to play. On that note, I thought that Jill was much quicker on her feet than Claire and Leon ever were in the last game. I mean, that really could just be the animation playing tricks on me, but I thought Jill was smoother to control than the RE2 protagonists. On the subject of controls, the core gameplay is the exact same from RE2, which means that if you liked that game, getting into this one shouldn't be a problem. Here we see a toy store littered with bad box art Mega Man toys. Love Mega Man, love to see a reference, although this does get myself thinking. In what universe does this design become popular? Icon status, no less. The kids of Raccoon City are all over this guy? He's called Bad Box Art Mega Man in our world for a reason, you know. It looks terrible. Hope it's clear that I'm joking right now. I said in the RE2 video that one of my bigger gripes on repeat runs was the fact that you need a defensive item to escape zombie grabs, or else they're going to bite you, but not turn you into a zombie. Gotta say, that part of the game's never made any sense to me. Like, don't people get turned into zombies via getting bitten? Unless that's not how the T-virus spreads, let me know below. But that's just a nitpick, not the gripe. The gripe was that it's a bit irksome that when left with no ammo or defensive items, you just have to tank the damage or hope you can get around them. Even at that, you could get grabbed by zombies from behind and no defensive items are going to save you in that instance. In RE3 make, this system was changed to something I enjoyed using, the dodge mechanic. Jill and Carlos can press the R1 button to evade enemies in a more effective way than Claire and Leon could. But when timed right, you get the perfect dodge, which allows you to get 3 locked-on shots at the enemy with your current weapon like it's reflex mode from Metal Gear Solid 5. This makes the game a lot less difficult, but I do think it's a positive addition. In RE2, seeing a zombie automatically gave the player a fight or flight response, no option in between. Now that you can dodge right past them, I found the enemies to be far less tense than RE2. However, this is a risk-reward system where executing the perfect dodge is instantly gratifying, however failure can result in being grabbed by the zombie and most likely bitten. Another change from RE2 is that when grabbed you must mash the X button, or the A button, to not escape, but just minimize the damage. Anyway, the dodge mechanics still lead to tense encounters. By the end of the game, I was lacking in ammo and needed to get around all these enemies, and it's that anticipation that adds thrill to the gameplay. Am I gonna get past this zombie? Hope my timing's good. Ah, there we go. It's simple, but very effective. RE2 had that fight or flight system I mentioned, and RE3 has the dodge mechanics. Which is better is just a matter of what you prefer in games, but I can say this. I think RE2's is the better system for a game that's supposed to make you scared of the enemies. But RE3's works in a more action-oriented sense. I enjoy both, but I think RE3's suits my tastes more, especially on repeat playthroughs, but RE2's has a greater impact on the tension, something that's supposed to be important in these games. I suppose this can't really be helped, but RE3 is just a lot less scary than the previous game. The fact that so many of its enemies are lifted straight from RE2 is just the beginning. If you've played RE2, you've already seen all these zombies before, literally right down to the models. In the RE2 video, I said that the more familiar something becomes, it is then less scary. So when you first encounter zombies in RE2, and then you find one that's still alive after being taken down, that's tense, and now you think to poke them with your knife if you have one, and see that they can be taken apart limb by limb, making them weaker overall, if you have just enough ammo for that and not for a kill. This process feels like growth within the game, and now, going into RE3, the game just doesn't have the same player growth since the same enemy patterns carry over. The system of tearing zombies apart isn't even in this game anyway, so that's a portion of strategy just removed. Sometimes RE3 just gets frustrating in ways I don't think RE2 did, thanks almost entirely to one-hit kill enemies. That raises the tension, I guess, but obviously Stalkers and these big things killing you immediately is not a satisfying challenge to overcome. But the biggest example of RE3 being less scary than RE2 will be where the original RE3 got its namesake, Nemesis. In this game, the big guy stalks Jill like Mr. X did Claire and Leon, but I never took him seriously when I played this game, but I suppose this does require some context. Resident Evil 3 begins slightly before Resident Evil 2 when the outbreak had just started. Like I said, you play as Jill Valentine from the first game. After the Arclay Mansion incident from that game, Jill and the other surviving STARS members have been trying to expose what the Umbrella Corporation were up to at the mansion, but it blew up so there's no proof of any of it. The T-virus leaks into Raccoon City, turning the population into hordes of the undead. Umbrella sent the Nemesis monster they created to hunt down members of STARS, but only Jill and Brad are in the city, with Brad getting killed a couple of minutes in. So Nemesis has its sights set on Jill for the entire game. Jill makes contact with Carlos as a member of the Umbrella rescue team, and ignoring her hatred of Umbrella, they work together trying to save what's left of Raccoon City. I think the story of this game is pretty strong. Like RE2, it makes the characters really likable, and in this game's case, its villain vile to the point of absurdity, making him really entertaining to have on screen. Jill's trusting Carlos takes time since he works for a branch of Umbrella, like I said, but he really doesn't know what they're up to, and his squad genuinely is trying to help. He even risks his own life when Jill gets infected with the virus to save her. This game being the only appearance of Carlos in the series, but the character left a positive impression on me in both playthroughs. The game does a good job keeping continuity with RE2 as well. Like this part where the gun shop owner knows Jill, informing that part in Leon's story where you find something that Jill left behind at the store, and the scene also having a natural dramatic irony because he's all jumpy, Jill not knowing why, but you do because in Leon's story of RE2, his daughter's turned into a zombie. I like how, as Carlos, you have to travel to the Raccoon City Police Department before Leon and Claire get there, so you don't travel through the doors and rooms that they will when they get there. Explaining things you see in that game, like how these two police officers wound up where they did, or how this wall got blown up, and why the zombies behind it are dead. Why this room is unlocked, and best of all, seeing the zombie version of Brad actually biting Marvin, informing his appearance in RE2. Although I don't know how you can unlock these lockers as Carlos and they'll still be locked in RE2, but that's a tiny detail. And before I forget, I thought it was great that they kept the original save room theme from RE3 and rectified the mistake from the RE2 soundtrack, giving the RPD its save room theme back as well. But back to where this game starts to fall flat, Nemesis. Compare his introduction to Mr. X. In that game, you're starting to get the hang of it and bam, monster chasing you. Adds an extra layer to the game, keeping things unpredictable. In RE3, Nemesis just bursts through the wall in the first 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes of gameplay, just first-person walking, a mechanic that's never seen again for the rest of the campaign. With cutscenes that set the stage that RE3 remake has a fetish for torture. If that's your thing, whatever, I just thought it was kind of funny how Jill goes through uncharted levels of pain and punishment in this game. I love action movies and one-liners, so I certainly didn't mind that in RE3. I mean, RE4 kicks ass after all. It was just kind of a surprising tone shift from RE2. But I keep getting distracted from talking about Nemesis. I'm sure the devs saw how famous Mr. X became as a result of RE2 make and wanted to get people hyped up for more of that in RE3, but the level of action movie stunts that this game reaches with him just becomes hard to view as an actual threat. As I mentioned, he first busts through the wall, but then is crashing through floors in an on-fire apartment building and then chasing Jill with the debris. He targets Jill with rockets and a flamethrower, knocks over this toy store head, making that chase you down the street. Nemesis just didn't scare me, he made me laugh. Especially when I catch in the corner of my eye that he's fucking sprinting after you, like damn dude, he really wants to punch Jill in the face. Except when she goes into the toy store. There, he's perfectly content, waiting for you through the window. I know Mr. X didn't follow you into the STARS office or save rooms, but again, just the sight of Nemesis standing there for however long it takes. I walk out the door, the music ramps up as he comes towards me, but I walk back in the store and he's just standing there at the window again. I'm sorry, but I thought that was really funny. Despite all the powers Nemesis has, it takes one grenade for him to go down. He drops useful weapon upgrades for you. Combat's a much larger focus in RE3 Remake, as you can no doubt tell. Here we get the standard pistol that can be upgraded for larger capacity and a suppressor. The shotgun, which can also have its capacity increased, a different pistol that can fire 3 bullets at a time, and a grenade launcher that functions like Claire's, but has more ammo types. In RE2, Claire would use fire rounds and acid rounds, but now you can also get mine rounds which can be planted and have an enemy walk into them. Obviously put to use in the Nemesis boss fight where he runs around the arena. A little basic there with the solution, but still. One issue I do have with though is that you unlock the grenade gun right after you meet an enemy that it takes care of easily, as in one hit. Which already wasn't much of a challenge besides the instant kill attack. Again, you gotta love how RE2 paced things out. You get to the sewers and the G-monsters are everywhere and introduce the poison status into the game. How are we gonna take them out? Well, explore past a ton of them and you get the progression items and Leon's flamethrower / Claire's spark shot. That ought to do it. I hope my point is clear. I just think RE2 handles all these different elements so much better than RE3 does. But anyway, when playing as Carlos, you get a standard pistol and the assault rifle which tears into zombie flesh like it's nobody's business. The game designers also thought it was pretty cool, and that's how Carlos winds up with an enemy rush segment where he defends Jill and Tyrell from an army of zombies. RE3 is more combat focused, but it's not without the exploration from RE2. In this game, you first run through the streets of Raccoon City, finding yourself inside this spider cave, traveling to the sewers, the RPD, and the hospital as Carlos, and then you can run through the hospital as Jill if you want to and find things Carlos could not, and then you have a lab area at the end. The curious mind is still rewarded in this game as you can find the cable cutters to get access to this shop as well as your hands on the shotgun, or how you can find these fancy jewels in the city and use them to get upgrades, and one of them being an RPD hip pouch, which increases your item capacity. Most of the exploration comes from Jill's lockpick as it opens doors like the toy store, locker openings that hide items, or chests you can find, like this upstairs portion of a house you may optionally look into. But on the whole, these areas aren't as solid as RE2's roster, the RPD just being perfect in that game, the sewers having the great pacing like I just said a moment ago, and the nest being filled with dread as you march towards the end of the game. But a different kind in the start because now you're powerful enough to take on the hordes of enemies. It's just the anticipation of the ending you're looking forward to at that point. In this game, most of the areas are over before it even feels like they got going, which can be said for the streets, RPD, the sewers, and arguably the hospital, which I'd say is the best part of the game in terms of level design and exploration, but you only do that as Carlos. If you go back through it as Jill, there's plenty to see that makes the most of the location, but that's optional. Not a con, but still. It's the hospital which also has these notes that tell the story of the staff getting overworked as it was ground zero for the outbreak. The staff having no idea what to do with these people who are literally turning into zombies. Even establishing something that Jill wonders out loud.
How is it no one in the hospital ever noticed all this?
Well, it was off limits. The staff of the hospital did not know Umbrella had a secret base under it. The final area is also kind of bland though. Like the sewers, we already saw a place like this in RE2, as I guess Umbrella has multiple secret bases in Raccoon City, and like the previous areas, you aren't here very long. Run through the hallways, mix the ingredients for the vaccine, and it's done. If the individual areas were going to be lesser than the ones in RE2, I'd say the game would have benefited for having more of them. Like the stuff that was cut, since the original RE3 apparently had more areas to run around in the remake. But by the end, Jill destroys the Nemesis, the massive railgun, the vaccine is destroyed, but Jill and Carlos get away just in time because the story, after the time jump where RE2 happens, reveals that the White House is going to nuke Raccoon City to stop the virus from getting outside. That explosion being the note RE3 remake goes out on. With this being my second playthrough, I can say more confidently how I feel about this game. Resident Evil 3 is a good game, all things considered. This video, and my feelings on it prior to this review, had been focused on how RE3 fared as a sequel to RE2, and in all the areas of that game that captivated me were areas I thought RE3 was sorely lacking in. This brings in the conversation of whether or not it's fair to compare a game to what you want it to be versus what it actually is. Playing this game, I think it's pretty clear this wasn't supposed to be the same game as RE2 just with a new story and some new maps. RE3 feels pretty deliberate in its set-piece driven action. Discussing how it fares in that category isn't particularly favorable though. I think an Uncharted game would just do a much better job giving you more interesting set pieces, as what is here just kind of felt basic, predictable. I don't know, I just mean to say that if this game was going for high-octane action, I don't think it was engaging on that front, nor do I think it was a captivating horror game. With these mechanics and what exploratory elements are there, I think RE3 is a game I can recommend. It's easy to understand and get into, it's not broken or rushed in any obvious capacity, but it just doesn't stand out amongst the crowd or leave a lasting impression. So while that write-up sounds negative, it's just kinda how I see it. A game I played, got enjoyment out of, but didn't live up to my impressions of RE2 making my final verdict in the game just being it's a disappointing sequel at the end of the day.